mainly in the context of the national blackout on information. I want to of the moderator to that aspect in line with what was referred to by some speakers on the issue of limitations on rights and freedoms, media rights included, as well as I think there was a brief mention of mediating platform. And I would like to ask for more elaboration on that in the context of a legal framework. How can these issues be accommodated? Director of Ceremony, I actually want to emphasize on the issue of the right to information, and especially at a national level. For example, the NBC blackout for a week, almost a week, which in my opinion, government should have declared a state of emergency. And because it intrudes on the rights of the nationals to information, and it affects people dearly. However, the issues are not necessarily receiving the necessary attention. What I'm actually basically saying is that the basic right of the media workers of the national broadcaster, of their right to strike and so on, versus the rights of a national to information. How do we compare the two? I see the importance of national broadcasting in light of, for example, in the olden days of the coup d'etat, anybody who takes power would run to the national broadcaster to prove that they are in power. Now in Namibia, if the national broadcaster has a blackout, do we have blackout in governance? I think there is a need to look at this aspect in a legal framework, how those two affect each other. And also would like to understand how we can see the rights of the media workers. Like also, I think the rights of the medical personnel, for example, is also limited in terms of strikes because it affects on it could put people's lives at risk. And I see the parallel in this case and would want this matter to be addressed. And the other point I want to also allude to is the one on the platform where government refuses information, like we had on the GRPF issue, where there was a national demand of civil servants to information and it was simply ignored. Does the framework make provision for a platform, a mediating platform, where one can run to as a mediator that could enforce government to provide such information? And I think it would be great if we look at the lobbying or sensitization of civilians as well, as about their right to information. Because I think in Namibia currently, if you demand information, you regard it as a sellout. Because people don't see it as their basic right. And I think there is a gap or need for provision in the policy that people need to be made to understand that it is their right. Thank you.
Hi, thanks. I'm Joris Coman, representing the Free and Open Source Software Foundation for Africa. A quick question, it's a housekeeping thing. Why is Polis Noah not doing a presentation? Some of us have come all the way from wherever to listen to Mr. Noah. Where is he?
We had a dinner last night where the presiding officer was to be the Prime Minister, who called out sick. And in order to rescue the evening, we asked Mr. Polis Noah to be the speaker. So he gave his speech last night. He was to be here for additional input and to interact with us. Hopefully, we also, because of the timing, he may be on his way, because as per the schedule, he was to be here like as of 12. So I hope he's on his way. But if should he not make it, yes, his main remarks were done last night, and hopefully we have great minds in this house to fill in the gap should he not come.
One, two, okay. Thank you very much for the platform. I am Lucas Betwell, representative from the Office of the Auditor General, Namibia. I have a comment, additional comment, and a question to the House as well. On the comment, I'd like to highlight a very pertinent issue in my observation in government and public service in general. Public institutions need to realize, or the incumbents of public institutions need to realize that they are servants of the people. So we need to move away from the notion of practicing institutional politics. Let's leave the politics to the politicians and the parliamentarians. We need to focus on service delivery. We need to serve the people. That's the comment I had. A question to the House in terms of the RTI law. I just want to ask perhaps from the experts in the House and everybody else, who do we foresee to be, apart from government, who do we foresee to be the secondary, if not principal, custodians of such a law if it is to be passed? Because my main concern is on enforcement and implementation. I think as a country we are very, very efficient when it comes to drafting and policy making. At the end of the day, these documents accumulate dust in our office shelves and archives. So who do we foresee, be it in civil society, private sector, public sector, to be the principal or secondary custodians of such a law when it comes to enforcement and implementation, which would then lead to my concern, for example, what a colleague just highlighted there now, the issue of the NBC. Would that classic case be then viewed as a violation of such law, RTI law? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My name is Justin Ellis. I'm working for Turning Points Consultancy. But I actually wanted to speak to you because I've been 18 years in government and the last few years working as a consultant. I think we need to realize that one of the things which will happen if we have better access to information is that government is going to be very embarrassed. And that's not so much about the disclosure of information, but the fact that within government, information management is usually very weak. Filing systems are very often not well implemented. The electronic records management system, I think, has, according to my limited information, made very little progress. And that means that often valuable information within ministries exists on individual computers. These computers tend to crash or people move on and no one has access to that information anymore. And also government is very poor in actually interpreting its own data. And I found this especially in recent years. So when you ask a question, you may actually end up being given what I would call raw data. I work in education, so sometimes now I get information. It's a spreadsheet of 1,700 schools. Now it's up to me to use my skills, which are not great, but I'm learning, to process this information. So if you start asking intelligent questions of ministries, like how many are of this category, you're not necessarily going to find that the ministry actually can do it. It's good that you get the information. So I'm not against at all what we are demanding. I think, in fact, it's going to improve the data management within government. But I just don't want us to have high expectations that we are going to have a law. We're going to get everything we want just because we fill in a form to say we want to see such and such a file. I've seen some of these files and you find very little in it of any use at all. So I think we're busy with a very important process of improving the quality of government overall. It's not just a matter of getting this scandal or that scandal. It's actually about being able to second guess officialdom about how information is managed, how it's interpreted, how it's made accessible and processed. So I think we're busy with a very important thing here, which is not just about tracking down this or that grievance, but really about developing a capacity for us as citizens to be able to understand what's going on in the country. I hope that's not too general a comment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I am Lehman Sedi, one of the first black journalists in this country, Southwest Africa, then it was, but now Namibia, a retired pastor. Gentlemen and ladies, there is something I would really love to share with you today. Many times when we talk about information, access to information, we only think in terms of politics up and there. But within these few years that I've been doing freelance launching at the High Court, I've realized how less we know what's going on in our High Court. How less we know how the lawyers are manipulating, to be honest, manipulating, and that our lives are in the hand of judges who can and we can even get mad tomorrow morning, but that they have got to take crucial decisions. I think it's me that the journalism, you better go into those courts. We must also see to it that we introduce rules of the courts to our kids at schools, so that it doesn't become, I'm sorry to say this, I'm not a tribalist or ethicist, that it doesn't become a lawyer's company, but a people's court. Thank you very much.
One more comment from there, and then we start with the next session after some intervention from Henry.
Thank you very much. My name is Maria Kapere. I'm the General Secretary of Council of Churches in Namibia. Well, I would like to commend Justin for what he says, Justin Ellis, since he has been in government. And government's information provision is known that it's not adequate. But I would also mention the fact that building a nation means all institutions that are responsible for nation development, like corporate institutions, like, for example, companies, civil society organizations, political organizations, all institutions sit with relevant information that's needed for nation building. And if we ask, for example, a company like NAMDEP or any mining institution, any big institution in our country that has information on finance, for example, what they profits, what they earn, you will not get it. You will not really get what international companies and national companies are getting when it comes to profit that they are making. So there was a question of where do you start to draw the line of where do you get information? I know the government has the sole custodian right and is the steward to really search for information through that enactment of a legal framework will oblige each and every other institution to open up books, to open all relevant information that is needed for transparency at all levels in all institutions. But how far should the government go back in tracing that information? And how far will institutions, for example, be ready to provide that information? So we should take in consideration that it's not only government alone that is responsible to open up their books, but it's every institution that is responsible and has a responsibility for nationhood and national development.
Henry?
Okay, I think most of the interventions are comments, so I will not pretend that I want to elaborate on them. But I want to, using comments from Justin, indicate that the passage of comprehensive right to information law is not an event. It's a process and must be seen to be exactly that. That a process that begins to enhance dealing with the issue of how government manages information and executes its public mandate effectively. So if we all see this, there is no government that is prepared fully to do this. Governments every year and everywhere continue every day to endeavor to meet that obligation by allocating resources, by training its personnel, by educating citizens more on how they can utilize information. If we understand that, then there would be no problem to say perhaps we are still too far away to get into this process. That implementation can take phases, but those phases must be clearly discerned in a medium-term development framework of the country so that you can mark what progress is being made without necessarily dragging the feet. So it's good that Namibia may have some data sets on education that they are not yet able to interpret. Then the next level is how do we begin to work on that data so that it can make sense to researchers, it can make sense to educationalists and other people who want to plan for that area. Also the idea that passage of right to information would cause embarrassment to government. For sure it will. Our governments have tended to portray a picture that they are able. And if you paint that picture you are able, you've done something comprehensively, and it turns out that you've not been able. Perhaps this is what we've been lacking on the continent, because instead of our leaders and our technocrats getting embarrassed, they get emboldened for not being efficient. I think we just need to turn so that the embarrassment turns them into being more efficient. And I appreciate Luca's concern that bureaucrats must be able to serve citizens. They must be able to help politicians to deliver public service. If they are not doing that, then they are playing politics and they will be thrown out when those politicians are equally thrown out. Because it's not going to be forever that politicians will get away without delivery. I think it's clear and it's already happening here. I think Mama Maria, who talks about where do we start? I think there is a reason, there is a clear reason why right to information discussions begin with government first. will then move on to private bodies that perform public functions. But how can we begin to ask government to enforce that which it is not doing? So the reason as to why we start by governments is that we've all delegated that power by paying taxes and allowing them to take that space legitimately so that they can do that on our behalf. So if we begin to ensure that most government or all government bodies are open, they are transparent, they are accessible, you can easily then ask, in terms of corporations, what information should we require of them? And that is a corporate governance issue, that most of these companies might not disclose their profits in Namibia, but they do that in their home countries. So what has Namibia got to do on its local laws to ensure that they are also accountable here? Because corporate governance is a critical concern. For those who are part of the African peer review mechanism, it is a promise all governments are making to each other in the name of the new partnership for development in Africa. So it's possible. Lucas asked, where should this law be domiciled? Our proposal in the team that is working on the model law is that there is need to establish an oversight mechanism made up of an information commissioner or commissioners. That is the ideal starting point. And that office must be made independent to be able to offer that oversight. But we also understand that some countries are already bearing a heavy burden because of a big bureaucracy. So people are asking, is it possible to restructure some offices? For instance, I know that there is an ombudsperson office in Namibia. Can it be restructured so that it has a department that is able to take in these functions? I know that the Auditor General offices have been doing this, but purely on the financial side. It is our considered opinion that they have no capacity to take on any other role on oversight on freedom of information or right to information. So they have a horizontal accountability mechanism they can learn and share with the oversight mechanism of the Information Commissioner, but this will not be a duty they are able to take on board by themselves. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. We need to move on to our next session. It's on governance. Can it wait, please? Can you wait till the next session for... It is not about competing. We have a duty to keep time. So please. The next session, it's on governance, and Henry touched on the Ombudsman's office, how timely. The moderator for this session is Ms. Yvonne Dausap, Deputy Dean of the University of Namibia. No, of the Law Faculty of the University of Namibia. Okay. Presentation will be made by Eileen Rako, who's the director in the Office of the Ombudsman of the Republic of Namibia. Please. And panelists for input and intervention, Naida Hishono, Program Director at the Namibia Institute for Democracy, and Mary Jane Nkube, Executive Director, Transparency International Zimbabwe. Ali? Yes. 3. You don't have a presentation.
I think, good afternoon, everyone. As Kamana said, my name is Yvonne Dausap. You can call me Yvonne. And before Eileen speaks, I wanted to pick up on 2 points quickly, and hopefully the panelists can direct some of their comments to, I think, some of the things that I'm hearing people say within the session. And that is the question about disclosure versus secrecy. I think all of us agree that secrecy is the norm currently, and the reason why we want the new act, it's because we want to move towards disclosure, so that secrecy then becomes the exception to disclosure. So I'm hoping that when the Ombuds Office speaks, we will also address the fundamental question, is, at least for me, is the question of access to information about access to all information? Or is it information about what impacts on you, firstly as a person, that's your specific, and what impacts on the nation, which is the general? And I'm hoping that as part of the debates, we can start to unpack some of those questions. But welcome to the panel, and let me give her to set the pace for the discussion.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Luckily, we already sang the anthems the second time, so all protocol observed. At this stage, I prepared a presentation or a paper that I want to deliver on access to information as a human right. But I've made some notes of some of the discussions that continued here this morning and some of the issues that you raised, Yvonne, which is not part of my formal presentation, but I will talk a bit about it. Basically, we look at access to information from different perspectives. This is one about corruption, combating corruption. But inherently, I'm here to talk about it as a human right. It gives me great pleasure to start by quoting an excerpt from the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 59-1 of 14 December 1946. Freedom of information is a fundamental human right, and it's the touchstone of all freedoms to which the United Nations is consecrated. If you think about freedom to information, you just think of what, in a media context currently, what it can give you, or as a public citizen. But freedom of information has very different sides of the same coin. The right to know is one of them. Things that affects you, to have knowledge about it, to request on that. But the right to privacy is on the other side. So those rights must eventually balance out. The right to access to health is one of the rights touched by the right to freedom of information. We had currently a decision from our High Court in the sterilisation case, where they talk about informed consent. That's part of the right to information, to access to information. Another part of it is just to know how your money is spent. And this is where we are today. But it touches on different things. It touches on the right to have an interpreter present when you have the police explaining something to you. That's part of the right to fair trial. But you must be able to understand it in your own language. Just think of it. You are a patient coming from rural south, and you are treated in Windhoek by a person only speaking English. And I've found it many a time, I can't understand why people cannot be explained in their own language as to what is wrong with them, why they must drink these pills. And it's as basic as that. Internationally, we have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 19, that says everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference, and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media, regardless of frontiers. Then our main instrument with regard to the right to access to information is the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Article 19 says, everyone shall have the right to hold opinions without interference. Everyone shall have the right to freedom of expression. This right shall include to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas of all kinds, regardless of frontiers, either orally in